Um, Not that it's slightly dystopian. Don't get me wrong. Um, Not all that dystopian compared to some of the others, I don't think. But the main dystopian hook, I suppose. So we begin by meeting our main character, Kathy H, from the very, very beginning. That's the first thing we do as we meet her. Now, she's going to be a donor. So the basic concept of this, we don't figure this out till about halfway through, but the basic concept is these people are living in this house. It's a kind of like boarding school type vibe, similar to almost to the beginnings of the Handmaid's Tale. And they're talking about, what are we going to do when we grow up? We want to be an actor. I want to do this. I want to do that. And at one point, one of the teachers, a Miss Lucy, just says to them, "Look, I can't listen to this anymore. None of you are going to do anything." And they all kind of know they've been fed the information by their guardians. They're just not, they've never discussed it openly, but they
Hmm.
kind of know. And what they're really going to do is they're going to be harvested for parts. That's their job. So these are clone fake people, and their job is going to be to make donations to the person who they are clones of. So this person exists. They've got a liver problem. You're going to have to donate your liver. Now, I guess we're all thinking the same thing. Well, how many of those can you possibly do? It seems like they're lucky if they make it to a third donation. Like once they donate, then it's like, well, you're now in poor health because you're giving up parts of your body. So I guess they're just hospitalized and potentially make one or two more donations if needed before they die.
Hmm.
And I guess it depends how big the parts are that are needed, right? If something relatively small is needed, you might be able to do a couple. If they want something very critical, you're probably going to die after one. So that's sad. But they do have the opportunity to also be a carer, and they can be a carer even for other donors. So they have that option, and our main character doesn't actually become a donor for a long time because she's not needed. So she's just in a kind of carer role where she'll be eventually she cares for her boyfriend, but that's jumping ahead a little bit. So, but the very fact that she's able to care for her boyfriend means it's not that dystopian. Like they're not being kept apart or any of that kind of stuff. They're happy to put them together. But yeah, he will still have to donate his parts and he will die. Um, that's the sad part. I also want to mention that it's very similar to a movie I really, really love called The Island, and we talked about this, and I looked it up. It's
Yeah.
the same premise. They are living in a kind of fallout shelter almost type situation, so slightly different there. But they're being harvested for parts. They're all clones of people on the outside, and both were released in 2005. So it doesn't appear that either necessarily copied the other. But probably there's some common source material for both. I'm sure there's an older story somewhere with this kind of source material. I wouldn't be surprised. So there's a chap called Tommy, and that's the one that our girl Kath, ends up with at the very end, but not throughout the majority of the book. So that's a slight spoiler, technically. Her friend gets with Tommy, and her friend's not that great. I think she's got Ruth potentially. She's kind of one of those people who's always a pretender. They even talk about that she's pretending to read George Eliot, Daniel Deronda. One of the girls is pretending to read that, the book that I'll have to get to eventually. And there's a lot of that. There's a lot of pretending. And maybe it's typical high school kind of stuff. But it's like, they're all pretending to have sex when they don't really know anything about sex, and they're all pretending to have read great pieces of literature. And eventually our narrator says, we're all together all the time. Like when is this supposed to be happening? When are you reading George Eliot? I see you every day. So that's the sad part, and they are very controlled, but it's only
Hmm.
because they're in this kind of boarding school. And they're talking about having sex, but they're very young anyway, so I don't think they should be, and there's no issue there. Then we discover that they're actually very free because she starts talking about having loads of one night stands. And then they go into like a shed that has some porn magazines in it, and our main character just likes to go in there and look at them. And the guys are like, I didn't think girls like to do this. And it's like, okay, so there is a bit of sexual liberty. Now, at one point, a couple get caught having sex, and the teachers are kind of like, shouldn't be doing that. It's very bad. And I'm like, well, yeah, because they're like 15, so that actually seems fine.
Yeah. They have hormones that good luck controlling those.
Yeah, but that's what any school would do.
Hmm.
I don't see it as being that dystopian. That's the thing. Other than the harvesting organs part, of course. Once you kind
Yeah,
of get past that.
once you get past the worst thing.
The rest of it's not that bad, and they
Once
get
you get past
relative
the book
freedom.
burning, the rest of the world's fine.
I just think they have their friendships. They even go away on a day trip. So they have this thing when they're younger. They always talk about Norfolk, and they decide that Norfolk in England is this kind of anything that goes
It's
missing
their
gets.
Vinland or something.
Yeah, it's just like that's gone to Norfolk. That's why we don't see it anymore. That's just like that's where everything goes, basically. But eventually they go there and they're like, oh, it's just a kind of crappy little town, whatever, you know. But they're able to go there. Now there's a little bit of like, well, should they be going there? Do they have to rush back and, slip past the guards? But they kind of seem to have a relative. This is not 1984. This is not like Big Brother is watching you, you know. And once they leave,
No, no, it's not dystopian in the same way, but it's
yeah,
still like anti-utopian.
yes, that's very
You
fair.
can see it that way.
Once they leave their school, they kind of go to they don't go to like a college, it's just like an upgraded version where they then go to live with people and then wait until they're needed to be used, basically. But that's more like people coming from all sorts of different schools. And they tell them that their school is special because you can get into feral. If you're in love, they won't make you, die for longer. And of course, that turns out not to be true.
Hmm.
And where the title comes from is our main character. So this like sales van comes around once a month, and they buy things. And they buy. She has a cassette tape of old country music, and there's a song she listens to, and the lyrics are "Never Let Me Go." So that's where the title of the song comes from. And one of the teachers sees her dancing to this, and instead of telling her no, you shouldn't have music, whatever, just silently cries and leaves. And that's one of the moments where you realize things are sad, you know? They're not really going to
Hmm.
have, they're kind of preparing them for a life they're not really going to have, you know? Um, but other than that, they go about their business. The sad thing is her friend, I think it's Ruth, her friend dates Tommy. They say the other boys bully Tommy a little bit, and maybe he's a little bit. I don't think he's slow. I think he's just not necessarily like the others, you know? He's I don't know, but he seems like a nice guy anyway. But the others kind of bully him a little bit. They don't, he doesn't fit in. They're not friends with him necessarily. They can be mean to him, and then but his girlfriend is constantly teasing him. Like, oh, there you go, being goofy again. How are you gonna get along with everyone? Like, trying to change him. He starts taking up art and drawing animals, and she's just like, well, your art's garbage. I think it. Your friend here thinks it. Really kind of basically abusive behavior. And it's really sad. And the whole time, the reader is thinking Tommy should have ended up with our main character, with Kathy, not her friend. Her friend is really mean to him all the time. Um,
Well, she does kind of explain it, at least in the movie, I remember.
she
She
explains them.
basically
Yeah.
she basically just says she just was afraid to be alone, so it just kind of seduced him. Had nothing to do with liking him.
Mm. She reveals later in the book. Yeah, I don't know if she says that specific thing, but she basically says to her friend, she says, I'm very sorry, Kathy, because I've done several things to harm you, and you're supposed to be my best friend. One is that I made you feel weird and other when you told me you were having sexual urges. I basically told you that that was only you and there was something wrong with you, but actually I have it, and as far as I know, so does everyone. And that was really harmful to Kathy and her development because she thought
Yeah.
she was a freak for being interested in sex and looking at magazines. And the second thing is, I took Tommy from you when we all knew he was much better suited for you. I just selfishly took him and don't really even like him.
Mm.
So she's kind of not a good person, to be honest.
No, no.
Our
But in the movie, she's played by Keira Knightley, so that makes it
well,
all
there we
better,
go then.
right?
But is Kathy a good person? I mean, I guess so. She's just kind of a neutral person.
She kind of is.
She
She's
doesn't do
just there
heroic
as like a
deeds or anything.
supporter.
Yeah, but she's all right. And Tommy's fine and whatever. But as I say, like she gets some elements of explorative freedom to go about. She gets some elements of sexual freedom. The life they're living is fine if it wasn't for the fact that they were going to harvest the organs. There's no government control or anything like that. Um, I'm not going to spoil too much here, but they do eventually, much later, meet up with some of the teachers from the old school, and some events ensue with them. But I don't want to kind of go too much into like the ending of the
Sorry.
book. Um,
I'd be
I like
curious how they
Tommy.
compare with the movie, but yeah,
Hmm.
yeah.
Tommy's a good guy. I like that he's doing his art. So the reason he's doing art is the teachers tell them there's a gallery, and they basically say your stuff will make it into the gallery if you do really good art. Um, the real thing behind this, as I understand, I think maybe one of the teachers was trying to show that they had a soul or something like that. Like they're not clones because they're creating art, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that was supposed to be the purpose of it. But then the whole project gets shut down anyway. Um, so and Tommy was never good at art, and he never had anything in the gallery. But the gallery's not real, technically. It's semi. But yeah, so that's why he later, many years later, finally starts to do, I guess, a bit more avant-garde art, like not the stuff that the others were doing. And it's really sad to see his girlfriend just insulting him about it instead of encouraging him, you know?
Mm.
So I really don't like her. But that's it. Like, as I say, that's only 280 pages. And without spoiling the ending, that's basically the whole book.
That's fair. So, what do you give it?
I think I have to give it a yeah, yeah, yeah. I did enjoy it. It's not my
Good.
top three dystopias, to be honest. But
That's totally fine. I don't know if this is necessarily true, but I feel like when the movie came out, it was considered like young adult, which
could
is not
be.
your, I don't know. It's not
Yeah,
your usual type. So,
it was relatively simplistic. I would say that there was nothing insanely complicated, no real complex themes. I don't know if they would market it to young adults just because of the amount of sex references in it. Maybe I'm naive on that.
yeah, maybe.
But other than that, I think, yeah, it could be. It's nothing overly complex that a teenager certainly couldn't get to grips with, you know?
Yeah.
But the sex stuff kind of is a big element of it in some ways. But
So some parents wouldn't be happy about it.
yeah, I guess it's kind of down to discretion. But then you get that in movies as well, and some of that stuff is just down to like the individual discretion, you know? The only other point I didn't stress enough, because I said that this girl is not nice to Tommy. Tommy and Kathy really, really like and respect each other. Like that's really important to say that
Mm.
Tommy was like, I would rather have her behind me than any other guy. Like, I really respect her, and they have this really good connection, and they'll open up to each other and all this kind of stuff. So it's good to see that in the end they do eventually get together. Yeah, but